أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم وغاصب حقوقهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد, sisters and brothers in Iman, Salamun Alaikum. In our discussion on the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam's meeting with Hazrat Khizr, part of the tafsir of a section from Surah Al-Kahf, Surah number 18, we looked at the background, the beginning, and the three events which happened when Khizr, the teacher, allowed the student, Prophet Musa alayhi salam, to be in his company. And after three, protests or objections to the actions taken by Khizr alayhi salam, that was the end of the companionship. And this is where Khizr said, هَذَا فِرَاقٌ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكَ. This is the parting between me and you, according to the wordings of the Quran. However, as a benevolent teacher, Khizr decided not just to end the session in that way. He says, before you leave, I will explain to you the reasons behind the actions that I had taken, the actions that you could not understand, and therefore you were not able to contain yourself, and you objected to my decisions. And we saw the explanation of the first event, and that was the story of the boat. When Khizr and Musa, they were crossing the river, this is where Khizr made a hole in the boat, and Musa alayhi salam, being the prophet of the Sharia, could not contain himself, and he said, how can you do this? And the explanation that we saw from Khizr alayhi salam in this Surah Kahf, ayat number 17:9, this is yesterday we talked about it. أما السفينة فكانت لمساكين يعملون في البحر. That the boat belonged to the poor people who used to earn their livelihood in that river by transporting people and goods across. فَأَرَدْتُ أَنْ أَعِيبَهَا. Khizr says to Musa alayhi salam, I intended to make it defective, but not totally defective. Just, not ruin it totally. وَكَانَ why? وَكَانَ وَرَاءَهُمْ مَلِكٌ. Because there was over there a king coming from upstream of the river. يَأْخُذُ كُلُّ السَّفِينَةٍ غَصْبًا. And whenever he sees a good boat, he will forcefully take it. No compensation, no price for it. And so basically the end of our discussion was that Khizr alayhi salam was saying that by making that boat defective slightly, in a way that it can still be used and the defect can be repaired easily. It was a temporary defect that you saw me inflicting on the boat. That was actually to rescue it, to save these people, the poor boatmen, from being deprived of their means of livelihood. And I connected that at the end with this example from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, where the sixth Imam very beautifully, as a ta'wil of that story of the boat, he applied it in the case of a prominent Sahabi of his by the name of Zurara bin Ayun. Means there are some narrations, as I mentioned it yesterday, that when you study hadith, one of the things you have to know is credibility or otherwise of the narrators. So you have to know about the ashab. And one of the prominent narrators of the hadith of the fifth Imam is Zurara bin Ayun. He was also a companion of the sixth Imam. And when we look at the report about these individuals, before we classify them reliable or not, we also see whether the Imams have said anything about them or not. And when it comes to this very famous figure by the name of Zurara bin Ayun, we see that there are some statements from the Imam of a negative type, where he has condemned Zurara. And I explained to you almost in entirety the hadith conversation of the sixth Imam with the son of Zurara, Abdullah bin Zurara, where Imam said to him, go to your father and tell him that when I badmouth him, for example, or when I say bad things about him, he shouldn't take it personally. I do this in order to save his life from the oppressive government of our time. Because if I praise him, anyone whom they consider to be my follower, they will go after him. They will harass him, they will hurt him, they will even kill him. In order to protect him and his life, I say things that in the eyes of the spies of the government, Zurara will not be considered to be a follower of the sixth Imam. And then Imam used this example, وَأَمَّا السَّفِينَةِ. He says the way Khizr, slightly damaged the boat so that the Zalim king would not seize it. Similarly, he says, I have, apparently damaged his reputation. So people will not consider him to be necessarily a Shia, so that the king will leave him alone. Otherwise, the words, and this is what I wanted to, yesterday I just went through it very quick. The actual words of the Imam about him is that, you are by Allah the most beloved of people to me, and the most beloved among the living and deceased companions of my father. Just think, he's a very, very great man, Zurara bin Ayun. The sixth Imam is saying that among all the companions of my father, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, you are the best of them, whether they are living or dead. And then he says, and look at the beautiful way Imam uses this story of Khizr, applies there. He says, you are the best of boats. In that, you are the best of boats in that great and copious river. And over you is a tyrant king who seized all good boats. Remember, boats here are Shias. And that river is the river of Hidayat and guidance. And whenever this tyrant ruler looks at the Shias, he'll just, seize them, to harm them, to harass them, to kill them. And so, and over you is a tyrant king who seized all good boats that flow in the river of guidance. Look at the adab, look at the eloquence, the way Imam uses that real example of boat and river, applies to Zurara and his own community during his own time. Salawat para. A message that we derive from this story and the way the sixth Imam applied that story of Safina and how Khizr, damaged it slightly in order to rescue it, is that not everyone in a society has to play the same role. And I would like to make some very strong statements, but I'll leave it to the imagination of your mind. Let us go to the days of the sixth Imam. You know the name Sayyid bin Ali al-Shahid? Sayyid bin Ali, he is the son of Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salatu wassalam. Brother of the fifth Imam, very pious, highly regarded by the Shia ulama to be among the pious followers of the Imam. Of course, he is son of the Imam, brother of the Imam, an uncle of the Imam. Means the sixth Imam is his nephew. And during the days of Hisham bin Abdul Malik, this is the later Umayyad time now, he, and this is after the wafat of his own brother, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. After the fifth Imam, Zayd bin Ali lived for 6 years after that, during the Imamat of our sixth Imam. And the sixth Imam is his nephew, younger in age, younger as far as the relationship is concerned, but higher in status. He is the Imam, whereas the uncle is not the Imam. And Zayd bin Ali decided to spearhead a movement of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar against the government of Hisham bin Abdul Malik in Iraq. He started a movement in the name of those who are accepted by the Ahlul Bayt, in the name of Al-Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar. And unfortunately, he was defeated and he was killed, and that's why we call him Zayd al-Shaheed. And highly praised by the Imams. But I would like to ask you this question. Sometimes I hear people in the last 30 years that I've been here in Canada, when Sayyid al-Khoui, rahmatullah alayhi, was alive, they used to say, oh, what is he doing? He's a coward sitting there in Najaf, just teaching. There was a time even similar words were used regarding al-Sistani. But just think about it. If you were there when Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam was the Imam of the time, sitting in Medina, using their opportunity that no other Imam before him had, and imparting the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt to the Shias and the Muslims in general. But he has an uncle who is a Mujahid and starts an uprising. Publicly or openly, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq doesn't say anything about him. Doesn't go to Iraq. Doesn't even ask the people to go there. But when he was killed, of course, he was grieved. And he was radhi and pleased with his movement. He even dedicated some money from his personal, money for the children of the shuhada who were killed with Zayd al-Shaheed. What would have been your outlook there? You would say, oh, I would rather follow Zayd bin Ali as the Imam and not this man sitting in Medina, busy with imparting the knowledge. This is what I'm saying, that think about it. In the eyes of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, Zurara bin Ayun was so important that he even, used negative names, descriptions for him publicly, so that the spies of the government will not consider him to be one of his followers. Because Imam considered his role in society in a different way from others. Zayd al-Shaheed has one role to play in society. Zurara bin Ayun has another role to play in society. You don't say, this is right, this is wrong. No, they are fulfilling their duty in their own way. हर बीमारी का एक नुस्खा नहीं होता है. Not all ills of the society can be cured by the same medicine. You have to look at time, you have to look at the place, and then take the right decision. And it even varies from person to person and position to position in what action a person should take. And so let's look at this and broaden our vision about the role of the society, because people need to play their roles in different way, and collectively they will be able to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. Salawat alaykum. Anyway, I just digressed. Let's go back to the tafsir here. Ayat number 80. Now Khizr alayhi salam goes to the explanation of this second event. وَعَمَّ الْغُلَامِ فَكَانَ أَبَوَاهُ مُؤْمِنِينَ فَخَشِينَا أَنْ يُرْهِقَهُمَا طُغْيَانًا وَكُفْرًا. As for the boat, and this was the most, as for the boy, and this is the difficult of the three events. His father were believers, and we feared lest he should make them suffer by being disobedient and ungrateful. Now, basically there are two things here. Number one, Khizr says that this young man had parents who were believers, mu'mineen. But his son was disobedient. And disobedient as well as ungrateful. Here, kufr in the meaning of being ungrateful. And there was a fear that because of these two negative, traits on this young man, there was a fear that he would basically make the parents suffer. Suffer in what sense? In pressurizing the parents in such a way that they will end up disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and eventually disbelieving in Him. And this is not just a hypothetical situation, it happens. Many times, you say, a person whom you consider to be a practicing mu'min, he said, what's going on with this event in your family? He said, Maulana, kya kare? Aulad ne majboor kar diya. They say it's not our decision, but they go along. And so this can be a real situation. And this is where, we see that. So Khizr is now explaining, فَأَرَدْنَا أَنْ يُبْدِلَهُمَا رَبُّهُمَا خَيْرًا مِنْهُ زَكَاةً وَأَقْرَبُ رَحْمًا. So we wished that their Lord may replace for them one who will be better than him in justice and more compassionate. And this is where, because of the concern that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as well as Khizr, because it's used in dual tense, khashina, both, Khizr as well as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had the concern that, this son will cause the parents also to become kafir at the end, disobey and be ungrateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now decides to replace that son, evil one, with a good one who will be just and compassionate. And so how is this replacement being done? This is where Khizr basically kills the young man. And later on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them another child who was a good one. And this is where it becomes even more difficult. Now this is the explanation that Khizr gave, that I knew the inner dimension of this situation, and based on the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I acted on it. You didn't know the inner dimension, and therefore you objected to it. But as far as the Muslims are concerned, this question comes up. How do you explain this? Khizr, yes, he was wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He had knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever he did was by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But how can you punish somebody for something which is going to happen in the future? And that is a difficult, discussion among the mufassirin. Let us see, there are actually 2 or 3 interpretations that I would like to share with you. Number one interpretation is that this young child was already causing distress to the parents. And it was expected that he would continue to do so more severely. Therefore, Khizr on Allah's command punished him. So it was not that something will happen only in future, but he was already in that process of doing evil against the parents. This is a good explanation. However, there is a problem. There is no clear indication that this young child or young man was already creating distress. The way the ayat have come down is talking about the future. And so this would have been a good explanation. But with that, comment on it, it becomes kind of difficult. Another interpretation of this is from Ayatollah Nasir Makarim Shirazi and his group, who did the tafsir under his supervision. And basically they explain it in a different way. They say that there are two systems which are there involved in the system of the running of the universe. One is known as Takwini, the Nizam, the system which is Takwini in the realm of creation. And the other is a Nizam which is known as Tashri'i in the realm of legislation, the laws which are sent down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the books and the Anbiya and the A'immah. So there are two different ways things happen in the world, on a Takwini level and on a Tashri'i level. Tashri'i, that's where the Sharia, the word Sharia comes from. Let me give you an example of what they are trying to say. Take the issue of test and trial. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I have created you, sent you to this dunya for imtihan and ibtila, for test and trial. And this is many places in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it clear that the purpose that I have sent you to this dunya is to go through ibtila and imtihan. How is the imtihan done? How is the test and trial done? There are two different levels. One is takwini and the other is tashri'i. Takwini is the famous ayat where we see in Surah Baqarah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, verily I am going to test you. بالخوف والجوع, with insecurity in the society, with hunger in society, during famine time, for example, or drought, or when you have loss of your wealth, or your life, or your children. So this is takwini way of the test and trial. There is also a tashri'i level of test and trial. When he's asking us to get up for Fajr namaz, especially in winter, leaving the warm bed, that is bala, isn't it? That is imtihan. How much you are willing to leave your warm bed to come out and do the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's also test and trial, but through rituals which are there, part of the Sharia. There is no natural forces putting you under test and trial. Fasting of the month of Ramadan. In the winter days it was okay. 5:30 it was time to eat. By this time we were home. Now we still have to wait till 9:15 at least to do iftar. And so this is also is test and trial. Longer fasting. You look at the Hajj. Look at the issue of zakat and khums and sadaqat. Different ways. Allah says, yes, you have earned it. You can use it for your life. Nobody says no, not to have comfortable life. But there is a portion you have to pay. لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ, for the beggar and those who have been deprived. And so there are things in the legislation where Allah is using that to test us whether we are true in our belief or not. Then we come to the level of punishment. That also can be seen on both levels. You have takwini level, and this was mostly in the examples that we see in the Quran from the past, where certain nations did certain things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned them again and again through their Anbiya, through the prophets who came, through the books which were sent to them. But when they still obeyed, there were situations where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intervened and punished them directly through the angels. So this was not something, or through agents in nature, whether flood comes in, or rain comes in, or earthquake, or winds and things like that. But there is also another level of punishment which is tashri'i, which is based on the penal code of the Sharia or the laws sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What we can according to this Tafsir Namuna of Atullah Makarim Shirazi, what they are trying to say is that this punishment given to young lady was not on the level of tashri'i, not on the level of, the penal code of the Sharia of, let's say, Musa alayhi salam, Shariat Musa, we know. This was on a takwini level where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not intervene all the time, but sometimes He does that. And so this was kind of exception to the norm. And Allah intervened by saying to Khizr that I would like this person to be eliminated because I would like to rescue the iman of the parents. He will be the cause of their kufr and I don't want him there. And so this is one way of, explaining the action of Khizr alayhi salam. Let me try, this is my humble attempt to explain this in a different dimension, a different way. Our prophets and our imams have been given access to ilm ghaib. And there is no doubt about it. It is from the Musallimat of the Shia belief. It is there in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ilm ghaib belongs to me, but there are many verses where He says, I give access to it to those whom I choose. And so essentially ilm ghaib is Allah's prerogative. But He gives access to those whom He wants and those whom He selects. And among them we have Anbiya, Mursaleen and the Aimma. And even the ilm ghaib given to them, not everybody is on the same level. You see, Musa and Khizr, they were different. Musa had ilm ghaib, Khizr had ilm ghaib, but not on the same dimension and the same level. And so, but when that ilm ghaib is given, you have to realize that it is only given to use it when they have to prove their credibility as a Nabi or the Imam. It is not to be used in judicial matters. For example, if two individuals come to Amir al-Mu'mineen or Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq or Imam Raza alayhi salam, with a dispute, one says one thing, another says something else. Imam will say, okay, no more talking. I know what is the fact and this is the judgment. No, the Imam will not do that. The Rasul will not do that. Because when it comes to judicial decisions, qazawat, they will go by the bayyina, by the evidence which is there, available. Yes, there have been cases with Amir al-Mu'mineen where he knew that the apparent evidence is pointing in a wrong direction. He would not say that the true decision is something else. Rather, he will guide them or guide the investigation with further questioning until they reach to the fact. But he will not pass the judgment based on his ilm ghaib. And so this is a rule that we know. Now, in this case, we see that, Khizr basically exercised ilm ghaib that he had by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah ordered him to do this. So that is always, we should keep that in mind. So, but when it comes to the normal judicial decisions by a Nabi or an Imam, they will not exercise that on the basis of their personal ilm ghaib about that case. However, there could be exception to the rule. And this is what we see in case of Hazrat Khizr. And interestingly, although I had said that this is the norm for all the time, Khizr was one exception to the norm. But when the zuhur of our Imam, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif happens, his standard of judgment will be very different from other Imams. He will not go with bayyina, the apparent, evidence which is there. He will go with his, God-gifted knowledge. And so what we see in the case of Khizr is actually a kind of a preview of what will happen when the Imam of our time, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Sharif, makes his appearance. Salawat. Inshallah, tomorrow tomorrow will be the majlis, but we will try to even bring the team into that majlis also about this. We have one more event to go through as far as the explanation given by Hazrat Khizr in Surah Kahf. Before we go into some very important lessons that we derive from this entire story of Musa alayhi salam and Khizr alayhi salam. What I would like to emphasize here is that, when we talk about judicial matters these days, and I'm sure you can understand what I mean to say, there's a lot of different discussion going on about the penal code in Islam, that Islam is harsh and Islam is this and that. You have to realize whenever we talk about Islamic penal code, whether the punishment given for certain sins and crimes are harsh, this is not to be exercised by anyone wherever they want. There is a system and a process. It has to be a Muslim in an Islamic government. It has to be the role of the Sharia. And in every individual case, the process has to be followed. Otherwise, it is miscarriage of justice. So sometimes when we hear about these extremists saying, oh, we are doing this in the name of Allah, no, they are not doing it in the name of Allah, they are doing it in the name of shaitan. They have nothing to do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing to do with Sharia, nothing to do with Quran, nothing to do with the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is a matter of very seriousness when it comes to the penal code in Islam. Let me emphasize a comment which I made a few nights ago, that especially when you go through the Kitab al-Qadha in fiqh, where you study about the process of judgment, evidence, and the series of punishment which are there for different things, when it comes to capital punishment and physical, discipline in a sense, which are severe, there the qadi is always told, you have to be absolutely sure about it. If there is any doubt in the evidence, you will not be allowed to exercise the extreme form of punishment. It is there. We cannot reject it. We have to believe in it. But it doesn't just work wherever an individual wants. It has to be according to the system. Unfortunately, even some of the Muslim countries, they use system in a very wrong way. Let me just give you an example. Many times we hear these documentaries about women who are in prison in Pakistan in large number. Why? Because they have been jailed for accusing somebody of the rape crime. And so because there were no evidence and no witnesses to that crime, therefore now they reverse the case and they say, well, you came with accusation against somebody, you were not able to bring witnesses, therefore now there will be a new case against you of defamation against that person. Qazf. This is known in the Sharia law. And I'm surprised. Either these are totally ignorant people, haven't studied fiqh, don't know anything about Kitab al-Qaza, because I have looked at this issue even in the Shia fiqh and the Sunni fiqh. When it comes to the victim, especially in this case of a woman making a claim that so-and-so raped me, if she is not able to bring evidence to convict that fellow will not be punished. But this lady will not be punished for defaming that person, because she is the victim there. And if it was a third party, if a third party says that so and so raped this woman, and if he is not able to bring evidence, then he will be punished for defaming that individual accused, but not the victim. And this is a clear ruling in the Shia fiqh as well as the Sunni Hanafi fiqh. So I don't know what these people do there. They give such a bad name to Islam and the image of Islam and the image of Sharia, that Sharia now has become a bad word in the Western world. And this is where we have to realize, we have to study this process of ourselves very clearly and have a very clear stand on this issue. That we believe in the Sharia, but it can only be exercised by those, number one, who are well educated in that field, trained properly, and this is only in a system of government where you have Islam as the system there. It's not just an arbitrary decision anybody can take anywhere in the world that they feel like it. No, they will be answerable in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah. A person who is not a mujtahid, it is haram for him to give fatwa. A person who is not a mujtahid, it's haram for him to make a judgment. He can be whatever, unless he has the permission from a mujtahid to be judge in a court case. And so these things are very serious as far as our own laws are concerned. Unfortunately, we have these ignorant people taking things in their own hands and giving a very negative name to our religion and our beautiful lifestyle known as Islam and the madhab of Tashayyu. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.